Welcome to this explainer. If you're a parent, a caregiver, or an educator here in Indiana, you already know that trying to figure out the world of special education, well, it can sometimes feel exactly like trying to read a map in a totally foreign language. But hey, don't worry, because today we are going to decode that map together. We're breaking down the complexities of Indiana special education, and we're specifically focusing on the critical differences between an IEP and a Section 504 plan. By the time we're done, you're going to feel confident and empowered when advocating for your child. Okay, let's dive into this roadmap for today. We'll be hitting 5 stops: special education basics, comparing the IEP versus the 504 plan, the evaluation process, knowing your parent rights, and finally, practical steps for families. First stop on our journey, Section 1, Special Education Basics, the foundation of support. Usually, the journey into special education starts with a simple but honestly kind of heavy question. Is your child struggling in school? That's the initial trigger for most families. You might be noticing your kid having a hard time academically, or maybe behaviorally, socially, medically, or even developmentally. And let's be real, it's completely normal to feel anxious about this. But recognizing that struggle, that is the very first absolutely crucial step toward getting them the right support so they can access school in a truly meaningful way. Now, when we talk about that support, we really have to talk about FAPE. You are going to hear this acronym a lot. It stands for Free Appropriate Public Education. And this is the foundational mandate under both state and federal law. It ensures that students with disabilities are guaranteed an education that's actually tailored to their needs, totally free of charge, and allows them to access their schooling in a meaningful way. Think of it like this: the foundational guarantee. The school system must adapt to your child's needs rather than just expecting your child to figure it all out alone. So, while FAPE is a federal concept, it's actually the state that implements it. The Indiana Department of Education, or IDOE, is the body that shapes the specific rules, the evaluation procedures, and the procedural safeguards that you and your school are going to follow. They provide all the current guidance to make sure schools are doing things by the book. They are literally your ultimate resource for how these big federal laws get applied right here in Indiana. And that brings us to Section 2, the IEP versus the 504 plan, the core difference. And this brilliantly illustrates the critical fork in the road. On one side, we've got the Individualized Education Program, or the IEP. This falls under a federal law called IDEA, and it's specifically for students who absolutely need specialized instruction and related services. Now, on the other side, we have the Section 504 plan. This actually comes from a totally different law, the 1973 Rehabilitation Act, which is a federal civil rights law. A 504 plan's main focus is preventing disability-based discrimination. It does this by providing accommodations so a student has equal access to school. So put simply, an IEP is about specialized instruction, while a 504 plan is all about equal access. So what does an IEP actually look like in practice? Well, it's a highly tailored written plan. It's going to typically include present levels of performance, annual goals, the actual special education services and related services, which, could be things like speech-language support or special transportation. It also includes progress reporting. But listen, one of the most vital components here is placement in the least restrictive environment. Indiana Disability Rights heavily emphasizes that students must receive their education in the least restrictive environment possible. That principle right there is central to the whole shebang of IEP planning in the state. Now, let's contrast that with a 504 plan. Remember, this is usually way more focused on access rather than instruction. You're not typically going to see specialized educational goals here. Instead, you'll see accommodations that basically level the playing field. We're talking things like extended time on tests, preferential seating in the classroom, maybe scheduled breaks, assistive technology, health supports, or modified testing conditions. For instance, a student might not need a modified math curriculum, right? But they might really need a quiet room to take their math test. That is what equal access looks like. So, the crucial point is this: not every student with a disability needs an IEP. Some kids do incredibly well in a general education setting with just 504 accommodations. Others, well, they might need both the specialized instruction of an IEP and those accommodations. The decision isn't just based on the label of the disability. No, it depends entirely on the specific educational impact that disability is actually having on the student. Moving right along to Section 3, the evaluation process, how to qualify in Indiana. Let's move to and see how this builds in 3 logical steps. First, qualification always starts with a concern. That could come from you, or it could come from a teacher. Second, the parent formally requests an evaluation. And third, the school steps in to conduct that evaluation to see if the student meets the specific criteria under either IDA for an IEP or Section 504. Basically, the school is looking to see if the student has a disability that substantially limits a major life activity, and what kind of instruction or accommodation they're going to need as a result. Now, this brings us to a massive point of confusion, and it is something every single parent needs to know. Eligibility is not based solely on a medical diagnosis. You might have a medical diagnosis from a doctor, and hey, while that certainly helps explain the concern, the school still has to determine how that disability actually affects school functioning. That is exactly why school documentation, teacher input, and your own observations as a family matter so much. They are the things that truly prove the educational impact. Okay, let's transition to Section 4, knowing your parent rights, the rules of the road. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how this single quote essentially summarizes the entire philosophy of Indiana's special education guidelines. Students with disabilities are entitled to supports that allow them to access school appropriately. Listen, you are not asking for a favor here. Your child is entitled to this support, and Indiana provides significant procedural safeguards to make sure this actually happens. Those safeguards, they give you real power in this process. You have the right to annual written notices, and you absolutely must give consent for evaluations. If you happen to disagree with the school, you have rights to dispute resolution and mediation. Indiana even offers something called facilitated IEPs at the request of schools or parents. It's this amazing conflict prevention option where an outside facilitator comes in to help run the meeting. Furthermore, you can seek assistance from Indiana Disability Rights, which helps students under 22 who qualify for these services. The big takeaway? You are never alone in this process. You also have strict privacy rights under FERPA. That stands for the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act. Basically, this federal law protects the privacy of your child's education records. Schools generally cannot release information from a student's record without your written permission. This should definitely give you some peace of mind when you're sharing private medical information, external evaluations, or sensitive reports with the school team. And just like that, we've reached our final destination. Section 5, Practical Steps for Families, Navigating Forward. Let's turn all this legal and procedural knowledge into real action. First off, things change, right? Indiana continually updates its rules and resources, so always make sure you're using current Indiana Department of Education resources. Skip those outdated handouts from 5 years ago. Also, it's important to realize that disability support in Indiana isn't just limited to a desk in a classroom. The IDOE coordinates support across early childhood services, preschool settings, and even school nutrition for special dietary needs. It really is a comprehensive system. So here is your game plan. If you suspect a need, take a calm and organized approach. First, put all your concerns in writing. Honestly, emails are fantastic for creating a paper trail. Ask for an evaluation formally. Request copies of all notices, evaluations, and draft plans. Once a plan is actually in place, stay engaged. Actively track whether those accommodations are genuinely being implemented in the classroom. And finally, use the state resources we talked about if you run into any disagreements. Clarity and documentation, those are your absolute best tools for progress. We've covered a ton of ground today, from the fundamental mandate of FAPE to the critical differences between specialized instruction in an IEP and the equal access provided by a 504 plan. You now know how the evaluation process works and the immense power of your procedural safeguards right here in Indiana. So I leave you with this final provocative question. What is the right path for your child's learning? With the knowledge you have now, you are fully equipped to partner with your school, ask the tough questions, and find out. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and best of luck as you navigate the road ahead.